Hey, class, I hope you are having a great week. Hopefully, you had a fantastic Thanksgiving. And as we move towards Christmas, we are in week 5. We only have a few weeks left of the class. And I wanted to take just a moment and commend you for doing an excellent job. As I noted in the announcements, you're doing a fine job with the discussions as well as the written assignments. And I commend each of you for working so hard. Always those two holidays that are back to back, and when you're in class, it's always challenging to try to work those in and plan your next term. As well as pay the bills, whatever you got going on. So it's a busy time. It seems that we're always busy. It's always challenging to try to get your assignments in on time and work with everything else you have to do with your family, etc. So I understand. I always try to show some flexibility during this time. If you do get behind on your assignments, just stay in contact with me. Let me know and try to get those into me as soon as you can. So again, thank you for doing such a good job on all the assignments. Um, this week in week 5, we are exploring risk reduction in recovery. I've shared a few different examples and links, papers, etc. For you to look over. I encourage you to take a look at those. It will help you to understand the recovery process as well as really gain some good information into what risk reduction and recovery is. Now, interesting enough, this is a fairly new concept. A fairly new concept in that we term it, we identify it, and we call it risk reduction during recovery. In some cases, this has been going on for a while with communities and with FEMA, but not to the point that we really see it now. And what this really means is that in the recovery phase, remember we talk about mitigation, pre-disaster mitigation, post-disaster mitigation. What the recovery phase after, which is really post-disaster, if you will, although there seems to be a blurred line between the response phase and recovery sometimes, as we've noted in our reading material. Sometimes there's a real blurred line there about when it switches. There's even some that say no, it's the same thing, but we can define that from the time that we go from the rescue mode to recovery, and we start trying to get a community back to normal. Well, the risk reduction phase and really post-disaster mitigation allows us to identify some of the risk that would have always been there, sort of was there before the disaster took place. And so now we can start working on that risk reduction. Now, keep in mind that the recovery phase, it doesn't happen always in a matter of days. Typically, the responders move out and our outside resources that maybe were brought into the state as far as EMAC agreements go, they leave, but we have to get the community back to a state where it's all normal. Well, it only makes sense in the process if we're going to be rebuilding anyway and addressing those issues that we use post-disaster mitigation and we use risk reduction to try to, in fact, reduce some of those risks that were there so that the next disaster that takes place doesn't impact the community in such a way that it did in this disaster. For example, flooding. Yes, we have post-disaster mitigation. We can use some of those funding that we've learned about as part of the Stafford Act as well as others. But we identify those risks, whether it's levees that need to be repaired or maybe the Corps of Engineers buying out homes in a floodplain, relocating people, upgrading the siren systems in a community, the notification systems, electrical systems, whatever the problem is, in order to reduce risk. And even vulnerability, we have some populations that are more vulnerable than others, and maybe they didn't get the attention that they needed before the disaster, But now that the disaster has occurred and we're in this phase, we can use risk reduction to address those, I guess, functional vulnerable populations and try to get them some assistance, whether that's with housing or food or whatever, so that they are not as impacted next time. And keep in mind that just because a disaster happened today doesn't mean that we're going to have one another 10 years from now, 100 years from now. It could happen in the same area again tomorrow. That's why we see such as a probability with a 100-year flood, and then it's 0.1% each year, typically just called 1% chance that flood could occur, and that that doesn't change. Each year it's still 1%, even after we have a flood. And then 500-year flood, of course, is 2. So a little bit different there. It gives us an opportunity to really touch that community and make a difference. Now, if you consider Hurricane Katrina, we have done some risk reduction there, but in the recovery phase, there's areas that were just never rebuilt. Some of that is due to money or politics, but some of the people just never returned. And so in those areas where they did, that risk reduction as part of the recovery phase is being used. It's just not as widespread in the New Orleans area as we've seen with some of the other more recent disasters, such as Hurricane Harvey that hit Texas. And there's really an examination that's taking place on the academic side as to whether or not risk reduction is actually being effective in that Houston area where Hurricane Harvey really hit hard as part of that recovery phase, because there's lots of cleaning and things that are going on, the rebuilding that's taking place there. But in order to reduce those risks in a neighborhood, in a community, the recovery phase is a good place to do it. So we can do a lot of things there in that recovery phase, as we mentioned, with risk reduction, with post-disaster mitigation, hopefully using using federal funding to help us get the community back where it needs to be. Hopefully you've taken a look at those links. Hopefully you've taken a look at some of those examples that I gave you. I'd encourage you to do that if you've not done it. As we move forward, I continue or encourage you to continue working on your APA. First, I want you to learn material. That's the main thing. It's always important to learn the material. Use those examples, and if you're not referring back to the examples that I shared in the announcements, please do that. With regard to APA with citations and references, please be careful about speaking in passive voice. What's your subject-verb agreement? I'll try to give you a little more feedback on that as we move forward in these last few weeks. But as I stated, you're doing a fantastic job. Remember, please post by Thursday. Please have the initial post in by Thursday, and then reply to your peers by Sunday. If you have time while you're there, go ahead and reply to your peers since you're already there as we move forward. And then take a look at that final project. If you've not emailed me, make sure you've done that. Make sure you go back and look at week 1, look at the syllabus, make sure you're on track with that final. I don't want you to wait to the last minute to get that in. So again, I hope you're doing good. It looks like you are, certainly. Thank you for the engagement, the enhanced, extended, detailed points that you're sharing. Thank you for all the hard work. If you need my help, just let me know. Have a great week. I'll see you again later this week, and I'll see you in the discussions. Thank you for taking time to watch this video. Have a great day.